What's up, everybody? Today we are going to be talking about one of the most popular topics in real estate, and that is wholesaling. And that is because it's one of the best ways for beginners to get started. This is my most suggested way for when people come to me and say, hey, I want to get started, but I don't have a lot of money or experience. How can I get started? I always say, start off by wholesaling. Then, of course, they say, well, what is that and how do I do it? And that's what this video is going to be for. All right, so first of all, what is wholesaling? Wholesaling is essentially playing the middleman. You yourself are going to go out and find investment properties and put them into contract, and then you're going to bring that contract and that deal to an investor that has the money to purchase it for cash, and you are going to make a finder's fee essentially. So you're going to make money for finding the deals. And again, this is an excellent way to get started because again, you don't need a lot of money to get started. I'm not going to sit here and say you don't need any money because that's not true. You do need money for advertising and stuff like that, and I'll get into that in this video. But essentially, you don't need to have $20, $40, $50, $60, $100,000 to get started. You can get started with $1,000 to $5,000 in this business and get your first deal into contract and sell that thing and then start building capital from there. All right, so in this video, I'm going to go through 5 steps. 5 easy steps that if you do these steps, you should be able to wholesale your first property and find out if you like it or not and then take it from there. And this is an excellent way to grow capital so that one day you don't have to wholesale, although you could wholesale forever. Some people do it professionally and just start flipping houses yourself and investing in them yourself. But I still wholesale to this day. My partners and I, our company, still wholesales properties to this day. When we are overrun with houses and we don't have time to flip them right now, we will wholesale them to other investors. All right, without further ado, let's get into the video on the 5 steps to start wholesaling properties. Step number 1, you're gonna wanna get set up. And you're gonna wanna do this before anything else. I see a lot of people trying to rush into it and just run right out and start trying to find deals and put them together. But even if they find a deal, they don't know what to do with it. And that's because they're not set up. The first thing I want you to do is do the simple stuff. I want you to put a little bit of a website together. I want you to put a Facebook page together. I want you to get some business cards together, and these can simply just say your name and investor, right? You're essentially kind of being an investor. You're investing your time. Maybe you're not buying the house completely yourself, but an investor kind of gives some legitimacy to your name, tells people what you do, and it gives a little bit of a detail about you, and it's a lot easier than saying, hey, take down my name and number real quick. You want to be able to hand people a business card, especially when you start going to these meetings that I'm going to tell you about. Next would be the paperwork. You're going to go ahead and want to get some contracts together, maybe 5 or 10 contracts already put together and pre-printed, so that way you have them ready to go in case you do run into a deal. You can find these contracts through your local lawyer. You can get on Bigger Pockets. I think they have some copies. Reach out to people that are wholesaling and maybe you can buy like their template from them, but you are going to want to make it for your state. Every state has different rules and regulations and wording, so make sure your contract is specific to your state before you go out there signing contracts that don't apply to the state that you're selling in. And maybe even print up some shirts, something like this, Always have your brand, who you are, what you're doing, tells people about you right off the gate. If you're just showing up to their house in a Nike t-shirt, knocking on the door trying to buy in their house, they don't really know who you are or what you're about. But if you have a shirt that says investments on it or wholesaler or whatever you want to say on it, it could just be your initials, it kind of brings some legitimacy to your presence and why you're at their house. So those are some tips for getting set up. Step number 2, you're going to want to get a list of buyers together. Because what are you going to do when you find a deal and then you don't have anybody to sell it to? So here's some ways to get a list of buyers, aka investors, together. The easiest one is going to meetups in your area. Get on meetup.com, type in real estate investing meetups and go to these meetups and get your name out there, get your business card out there. Tell people what you're about, what you're doing. Tell them that you're trying to find them properties to invest in. They probably already know what you're about and what you're doing, but just tell them you're going to send them legit properties that you're going to do your research on first, and you just want their email so you can send these properties over to them. And you're not going to just get 1 or 2. This is a numbers game. You probably want to get at least 10 or 15 contacts, emails together before sending these properties out, because again, this whole thing, real estate in general, is a numbers game, and the more connections, the more properties, the more offers, the more often you're going to find a deal. Another way is just word of mouth. Call lawyers, call accountants, and ask anybody if you know that anybody's investing in the area that you are going to be finding deals and sending them directly to them, and they may give you their contact that way. Some of this is confidential, but everybody knows somebody that may be looking for what you're doing and they can connect you to. Lastly would just be advertise. Get your name out there on Facebook, tell friends and family what you're doing, and maybe they have people that are investors. You just never know. Let everybody know what you're doing. Don't spam it, but just let everybody know what you're doing and what you're about, and that way the word can travel and that will connect you with other people as well. All right, now step number 3. this gets into the fun part. This is finding and evaluating the deal. There's multiple ways to do all of this stuff. I'm just kind of giving you a short breakdown here, an easy to follow step-by-step guide, but you'll figure out more and sometimes better ways than even I'm telling you to do this stuff, but this should get you started. So first of all, the easiest one is just driving for dollars. That's just driving around neighborhoods, knocking on doors of dilapidated homes, the grass look like it hasn't been mowed, the house is falling down, knock on the neighbor's door, say, hey, do you know the owner of these people? And that's how you start finding these deals, by driving for dollars. Also, signs in the driveway or in the yard that say for sale by owner. That means they're typically not listed on the market, and usually that's for a reason. Sometimes people are just trying to dodge realtors, but oftentimes they've tried a realtor, they've tried listing it on the market, and it won't sell because it needs work. So a bank won't lend on it. So these are great properties to find for investors like myself, because we can go in there and put the money into it to get it listed on the market. So for sale by owner signs are a big one. They already have their number listed right on the sign for you 9 times out of 10. And those are super easy doors to knock on because you know they already want to sell. The other doors I'm telling you about driving for dollars, sometimes you're going to knock and you're going to get yelled at. That's going to happen. So again, a numbers game. The more doors you knock on, the more numbers you call, the more often you'll find a deal. Now for evaluating the deal. To evaluate the deal, you need to use something called comps, and these are comparable sales. What have other houses that are similar to this one sold for in the area recently? Not 10 miles away, not 10 years ago, but in that area and recently. And this is kind of how you figure out what that house is worth, price per square foot. That's another important thing. Look at the square footage. If you're comparing two different houses and one's 500 square feet and the other's 2,000 square feet, that's not a very good comp. You want to be within 100 or 200 square feet of each other, similar bathrooms, similar amount of rooms, yard, no yard, garage, no garage. These are all things to consider when looking at comps. So with that, let's say that a house in that neighborhood has recently sold for $200,000 fixed up, and that your house that you're looking at is very similar. You know that you can't pay $190 for that if it's not fixed up, because that only leaves you a $10,000 margin. You need to be able to pay a lot less for that, because you still need to make your wholesale commission. You still need to leave room for the investor to do the repairs and the investor to make money. So that's when the repairs come in, and that's more of a valuation. If you don't have an eye for this stuff, you may have to pay contractors or make friends with contractors to give you estimates on the repairs that house would need in order to get it in fully rehab condition. And this is going to be a numbers game as well. You're going to want to call multiple contractors. If you have any friends or family that can help you out, slide them $100, $50 to come look at the house with you to give you accurate numbers on that house for rehab. Because when you send these deals to investors, you need to have all those numbers together. So again, that's evaluating the property and making sure that it's a good deal. Because if you send them too many crappy deals, they're just going to delete your email. They're not going to respond to you anymore. They're going to know you're not doing your research. So please do your research in evaluating these deals and do it properly before sending out the email. Step number 4, making the offer. This is the most nervous part for most people outside of knocking on strangers' doors, and that's because you have to make these people an offer. And usually 9 times out of 10, it's going to be much less than they're asking, and that can make you nervous. But keep in mind, you're just making them an offer. You're not making them take the offer. So yes, it may upset some people when you tell them a number, but remember, they're trying to sell their house. They can't sell it on the market. The home's falling down. These are all reasons you're going to give them. They're paying the taxes on it. They're holding the utilities on it. So they want out of these houses. So if they're asking $100,000 and you make them an offer for $70,000, they still may take it because they've done the math and they say, well, look, this thing hasn't sold in over a year. It's just costing me money. So now's the time to make the offer. 2 offers. Hear me out. So the first offer is going to be the seller themselves. So you got to put in a good offer there. Remember, you have to do all the math on that. Your commission, the rehab, then the seller's commission on the other side, the investor's commission. Everybody has to make money here outside of the original seller. If they can make money, great, but 9 times out of 10, they're just trying to get out of that property. So the second offer you have to make is to the buyer, to your investor. Because keep in mind, he doesn't have to buy it for the price that you send it to him for. So let's say the house, you have it in contract for $100,000 and you send it to the investor for $120,000. So that's a $20,000 margin spread to you. There's no guarantee that they'll buy it for $120,000. You have to make it attractive to them at $120,000. Why should they pay $120,000? And some easy numbers on that would be, hey, I'm selling you this house for $120,000. The rehab on it would be about $80,000, so you're all in it for $200,000. Here's the comps on a finished house that's similar. They're selling for about $250,000. That's a $50,000 profit to the investor. Now that's attractive. Now if you send them the same deal and show them comps are $205,000, then they're going to be like, I'm only going to make $5,000 on this deal after rehab. No, thank you. So that's why it's super important that you send the correct information and make it attractive. That's the two offers. One to the original seller and one to your buyer. And that is making the offer. Real quick, a little bit more on that. There will be negotiation and you need to get good at negotiating. I highly recommend you read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's a great book to understand people and to start negotiating. There's other books out there as well. I'll try to link some of them below, but you're gonna have to learn how to negotiate it because usually the first offer on either side is not gonna get accepted and you need to learn how to negotiate in your favor, but also learn how to make a win-win-win scenario. A win for the seller, a win for you, the wholesaler, and a win for the investor/buyer. And finally, step number 5, closing the deal. So this can get a little bit tricky, and I need you to hear me out on this. When you're out there wholesaling properties, please be honest with everybody. Let everybody know what you're doing. Don't try to trick the seller into thinking that you're the investor, you're the buyer, because it can get extremely awkward at the closing table. And don't try to tell the investor, the buyer, that it's your house. Everybody needs to know kind of what you're doing. There's ways to word this that sound better than others, and that's a strategy you're gonna have to figure out. But do not pretend to be anything that you're not. Do not pretend that you have the money yourself. Don't pretend that it's your aunt's house when really it's not. It's just a random house you found. You need to be honest with all parties because it can get extremely awkward at the closing table if you weren't honest. Let's say that you said yourself you were the investor. Here's a pro tip. Say you're working with a group of investors because that's the truth. But let's say you said you were the investor. And let's say you get to the closing table and now you have 3 people sitting there and the seller's like, who is this? And all of a sudden he's like, well, I'm the investor. They can, and it's happened before, not to us, but I've heard stories, say, never mind, I want out. Now I know I can make more for my property because you're a wholesaler and you're just trying to make money off of me. Now that is true what you're doing, but if you're honest up front, they won't have a problem with that at the closing table. If you're not honest up front, it's going to be a huge problem at the closing table, or it could be, and it can get extremely awkward for all parties. Now, a way to get around that, I'm not saying to lie at all, but a way to get around any awkwardness at the closing table is something called a double closing or a blind closing. And that's basically when you close the house twice in one sitting. So basically, you and the seller close on your end, and then you quickly turn around and close with the buyer on the other end. And they're usually in 2 separate rooms, but they're back to back, and the original seller and the investor never see each other. This is becoming more and more rare, and again, a bit tricky to put together and oftentimes more expensive, but that is a way to get around any awkwardness at the closing table. Again, that's called a double closing. So then at closing, you will all get a check. The seller will get a check for the payoff of their house, or the bank will just keep their money if the bank is where they bank at for their mortgage. You will get a check for the difference in the selling price and the investor's buying price. And the investor won't give a check. They will actually give a check. So the investor does not get a check here. I apologize for that. They will actually give the check, usually to the lawyer or to the closer, and then they will divide that up amongst you and the seller, and then you walk away with your spread, which is usually, real quick, I should probably tell you this, usually on a wholesale deal, when you're just starting out, $2,000 to $5,000, maybe upwards of 10, depending on where you live. I've heard of people getting $100,000 checks on their first deal, but that is very rare, and I wouldn't count on that. You are just trying to get this first one under your belt, and that should make you extremely happy just to get that first one under your belt, you know, $5,000 profit in your pocket, and you've done it. You've wholesaled your first house. You kind of know what you did wrong the first time around. You know what to do better going forward, and that should be it. You should be ready to get out there and get even more deals, because remember, it's a numbers game. Lastly, before I close out this video, I want to give you a tip. Now that you've made the money, this should really be step 6. Now that you've made the money, and let's say you made $5,000, you need to save for taxes, and you need to reinvest that money back into yourself and your business. Not all of it. Take some of it for yourself. You've worked hard. Maybe you got personal bills, personal things to pay for, or maybe you just want to celebrate and buy yourself something nice. That's fine relative to how much money you've made. The rest of that money needs to be put back to work so that you can get more of these deals, bigger margins, and make more money. And again, don't forget about the tax man. All right, guys, I'm sure I've missed some stuff here. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below and I'll answer them. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Helps more people see it. And as always, thank you so much for following me. You can also follow me on my Instagram at The Frugal Investor, and I'll see you guys on the next video.